In today's video, we continue on with our NHL season preview series, and we look at the Boston Bruins. The 24-25 campaign saw the Bruins take a major step backwards and work their way down to the bottom of the Atlantic Division. Can they bounce back this season, or is that an indication of things to come? We'll discuss the season coming up for the Bruins coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we take a look at the season preview for the Boston Bruins as we're working our way through teams in the Atlantic Division. We kicked things off yesterday taking a look at Montreal, and now today we look at the Boston Bruins. So we're going to take a quick look and recap what transpired last year to kind of give us an indication where things are at with the team. We're going to take a look at their cap space, additions, subtractions, any rookies to watch for, trades we might see, contract extensions, what the lineup should look like, and one of the top questions facing the team going into the season. So let's first start by recapping the 24-25 season for the Boston Bruins. And it was really interesting, unexpected. A lot of things transpired for this team that I don't know that a lot of people saw it coming. I know some people were kind of predicting the demise, if you will, of the Bruins for a number of years, thinking it was just a matter of time before we saw a step back. A lot of people felt that the Bruins for a couple of years before this greatly overachieved. Were they right? Were they wrong? I'm not sure, but it was, I guess, some surprise for me that they took a step back. But to me, the bigger surprise was not that they took a step back, but it's how far that step back came. They finished with a record of 33, 39 and 10, 76 points, dead last, 8th overall in the Atlantic Division, missing the playoffs. They scored 222 goals, which was ranked 27th in the league, and they gave up 271, which was 26th in the league. So they had a minus 49 goal differential, and that's just not something you'd seen out of the Boston Bruins for quite an extended period of time. Now, early in the season, we saw a change behind the bench with Jim Montgomery being fired after a slow start with an 8-9-3 record. I think it's fair to say there was definitely more to that coaching change than just the slow start and just the record. There was talks that Montgomery and the Bruins had engaged in conversations about a contract extension. Things weren't going well, and I think the Bruins at that point were pretty concerned that they weren't going to be able to retain Montgomery. I do think that there was a difference in philosophy between the coach and management. There definitely had some things I think it's fair to say that they didn't see eye to eye on, and it was a relationship that may not have continued past that season anyway, regardless of how the team did. So I think they kind of used Jim Montgomery as a bit of a scapegoat for the slow start. They fired him, replaced him with internally with Joe Sacco, who really didn't do any better. Joe Sacco and the Bruins the rest of the way had a record of 25, 30, and 7. So, I mean, things didn't really improve at all. They ended up selling off a lot of core pieces. They started with some smaller names, worked their way all the way up to Captain Brad Marchand. But we saw Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Justin Brazeau, Brandon Carlo, Trent Frederick, Max Jones, all exit Beantown one way or another through trade before the NHL trade deadline. So it was a mass exodus for the Bruins, something that we haven't seen in a long time. Of course, they missed the playoffs, so their current playoff streak sits at 1 year out. Before that, they had made the playoffs for 8 consecutive years. And obviously were, not only a perennial playoff team, but obviously a top 3 team in the Atlantic, and had some of those years where they went deeper into the playoffs as well. Of course, they were led by their top player on the team, David Pastrnak, top scorer last year, 106 points. And just to show you how valuable he was, what a gap between Pastrnak and the next leading scorer, which was Morgan Geekie, who had a breakout career season, 33 goals, 57 points. So he almost doubled Geekie. That's just how valuable Pastrnak is to this team. It will be moving forward. After Geekie at 57 points, you had a few players like Zacha and Lindholm put up 47 points to be 3rd and 4th in team scoring as well. So after all that, they went through Montgomery, they went through Joe Sacco, and then in the offseason, they decided Sacco wasn't going to get the full-time job. they went out and hired themselves a new coach, which is former Bruins player and longtime NHL player Marco Sturm. Marco Sturm's got a good amount of experience head coaching at other levels and assistant coaching at the NHL. So he has a pretty good resume, long NHL career. We'll see how he will do with this Bruins club. But like I said, the big question going in, which we'll discuss here throughout the video, is can they bounce back, or is this season last year an indication of things to come that are going to take a little bit longer to work themselves out of? We'll see as we go along here. The cap space situation going into the season, they have $2 million in cap availability. So they do have room to make additional maneuvers should they feel that that's something they want to do here. They're not completely right to the penny or anything of that nature. Now, looking at how this team has changed, in the addition subtraction section of this video may not be overly big, but like I said, a lot of the subtractions really had already taken place at the deadline. They're not going to show up on this list, and I'll show you a graphic here courtesy of NHL Network, but it's not going to show you the captain Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Justin Brazeau, Brandon Carlo, Trent Frederick, Max Jones. They were all moved before the end of the season. But then throughout the offseason, we also seen them part ways with minor league goaltender Brandon Bussi. We got forwards Cole Kopke, Tyler Pitlick, and Vinny Lettieri, also all gone from the Bruins organization. Now they brought in a variety of new players, including veteran winger Victor Arvidsson come over from Edmonton. So obviously they're hoping he will be able to find his scoring touch again and resume maybe a better top six role than he tried to provide in Edmonton last year. We also saw them add some grit, sandpaper, annoying players to play against, and guys like Tanner Jeannot and Mikey Eismont. They brought back Sean Corrali as well, another forward. And then on the blue line, they brought in Henry Yokoharu, formerly of the Sabres, Jordan Harris, who started his career with Montreal, was traded to the Blue Jackets in the Patrick Laine trade, and then Harris was not retained in Columbus, became a free agent, signed with the Bruins. Of course, he spent time in the Boston area playing his college hockey. And then Victor Soderstrom also trying to make an NHL return, the former high first-round draft pick of the Arizona Coyotes. So nothing too crazy on the addition side of things that's going to make a major impact. At least you wouldn't think. They got some young defensemen to add to the mix to try to see if they can find a spot and, add a little bit of youth and a different look to the blue line. And you've got some veterans coming in the forward group that are going to be players that are just a little tougher to play against. Like I said, add a little bit of grit, a little bit of physicality, and just guys that can kind of get under your skin and, drop the gloves if necessary. That's what they've added. So not really, like I said, a lot of impact there. As far as rookies to watch, well, you might see players like Fraser Minton, who came over from Toronto in the Carlo trade, make an impact this year. Of course, they have their own former first-rounder, Matt Poitras. I wonder if he'll be spending more time with the Bruins at the NHL level this year as well. You got to wonder, too, about Fabian Lysell. This is a make-or-break season for him. So they do have some younger players that I guess they're probably hoping will get more time and see if they can make more impact. As far as players that could be traded this year, we've heard a lot of rumblings around players like Casey Middlestat, who came over from Colorado last year in the Coyle trade. Zaka's name has been out there as well. Korpisalo to some degree. It's not unfathomable to think that the Bruins will continue to maybe strip things down further throughout the season, depending on how things go. Now, as far as contract extensions go, players entering their final year that could sign a new deal. Well, there's not a lot really on the books that are going to be too concerned about that, but Andrew Peeke, defenseman on the back end, he may extend. That's a possibility. Victor Arvidsson comes over from the Oilers with 1 year left, but I would suspect that they're going to want to see him play and produce before getting a new contract. So I think that's probably something that, if it happened, would probably be late in the season if things were going well for him. Otherwise, he may walk into free agency next year. Johnny Beecher as well, looking for a new contract beyond the current season. So obviously he's going to be trying to really assert himself as a to continue to try to be a full-time NHLer and try to, not only grab a regular spot in the lineup, but grab a new contract for the year moving forward. Now, of course, this is what their projected lineup right now would look like based on, this is a combination of my opinion and what they have on a daily face-off site for the lineups. In goal, not a really big question. You've got Jeremy Swayman and Joonas Korpisalo will be your goaltending tandem. Of course, you do have Michael DiPietro as your number 3. I do wonder about him. I could have also mentioned him in the trade bait category that we looked at a few minutes ago. The future of DiPietro in Boston is certainly questionable, not because of him himself. He's done really well for them in the American Hockey League level. But because of that, other teams are taking notice, and he would need waivers to go back to the AHL this year. So if the Bruins want to make sure they don't lose him, they may carry 3 goalies, which really isn't good for anybody because you can't really give out enough playing time for everybody to be happy, especially with the contract and everything. You suspect Swayman will carry the bulk of the workload. Now we know, like I said, I mentioned Korpisalo's name in that trade section as well. And Korpisalo's last year in Boston was his first season. He went from being the starting goaltender for the Ottawa Senators, where he struggled, to being more of a backup with the Bruins and behind Swayman. Now, last year you could say that, Swayman didn't have a good season. The holdout, missing time to start, the whole training camp and all that, just the way everything played out with that contract, it was a distraction. It delayed him getting started on time. And it affected him. There's no doubt. He was not up to Jeremy Swayman level. Now, Jeremy Swayman, like his former counterpart, Linus Ullmark, who went to Ottawa for Korpisalo, they were both used to being in tandem for a few years and were one of the best tandems in the NHL. But they went from that to both playing more than they had ever played before. And, Swayman's season could have been affected by that as well. Now, Ullmark in Ottawa, I think, fair to say, I would call it a good season. It's not his best. He obviously wouldn't have Vezina a few years ago and had better numbers. But as the year went on, he seemed to get more comfortable and had long stretches where he was brilliant. So I do think that Linus' season in Ottawa was probably a little, fair to say, pretty good. But like I said, I was really curious how that dynamic was going to play out for both goalies, given that they were separated now. And in, situations where they're both got big money contracts, both making $8 million, and, well, the workloads were going to change drastically because of it. But Korpisalo, like I said, who was involved in that trade for Ullmark, appeared not to be thrilled with how little he played. But, again, his performance kind of dictated that, in my opinion. But he had made comments that he wasn't, he wanted to play more, basically. And there was some talk throughout the offseason that the team considered moving him. That there was, I don't think it was a scenario where he asked for a trade, but I think it was maybe a scenario where he and his agent made it known that they definitely want to play more. And if that wasn't going to happen, that they would prefer a trade. I think something like that probably went down behind the scenes, but we don't know exactly where things stand on that front. But right now, Swayman, Korpisalo will be your tandem. DiPietro will be an interesting name to watch. If they did move Korpisalo, that would free up an opportunity for DiPietro to be a full-time backup behind Swayman in the NHL. And we will see what the Bruins end up doing. Moving Korpisalo will be challenging, so it's difficult to say if that will play out or not. Their decor right now lines up like having Hampus Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy. Obviously, your top 2 guys can play together too a lot and be very effective. Now, they both are coming off significant injuries, so I do wonder, I don't know 100% health-wise if they're going to be ready to roll. Hopefully they are. You get Zadorov and Yokoharu likely are your second pair, and then you've got Peak and Lowry, most likely your third pair, with Jordan Harris fighting for time, likely as the number 7 defenseman. I do wonder how Soderstrom will play out. We'll have to see what his training camp is like. He could certainly challenge for playing time as well. But, on the left side, when everybody's healthy, you've got Lindholm, Zadorov, and Lowry. So, obviously, like I said, with health being a factor here, it's difficult to say how everything plays out, at least to start the season. But when everybody's healthy, that's what we're expecting the D-core to look like. In the forward group, you're going to have a top line of Elias Lindholm, David Pasternak, and Morgan Geekie. That could be an effective first line. Obviously, Lindholm is not quite producing the points level he did when he was on the top line with the Calgary Flames a number of years ago, which is where he kind of generated a lot of his value, and that value might be kind of running a little short. That was a lot of that history was what got him that contract. But he's not really number one center in my opinion. He's a good center. He's a good two-way center. He's probably, based on what was available on the market, a good option to bring in when Bergeron retired because he could play a similar style. He's not Bergeron's level, but he plays the same way. So that type of player, impactful, helpful, but not nearly the offense coming out of him that we've seen Bergeron do. Now, after that, things get interesting. You've got a guy like Zacha who's likely going to end up on that second line, or you put Zacha at first line center with Pasta and Geekie. That's a possibility as well. But Zacha right now likely on the second line with Mittelstadt and Arvidsson. Unless they want to change up their centerman, they could move Lindholm and then go with Zacha and Mittelstadt down the middle, 1, 2, 3. Or between Zacha and Mittelstadt, maybe Zacha has to go to the wing. I don't know. But right now, based on Daily Faceoff's projection, they have Zacha on the wing with Mittelstadt and Arvidsson. On your third line, they've got a line of Fraser Minton getting the third line center spot, playing with Tanner Jeannot and either Blumel or Poitras. And then you've got Sean Corrales as the fourth line centerman with Mikey Eyssimont and probably Johnny Beecher. So, again, the bottom six is definitely a work in progress. You can possibly have a couple of youngsters and a bunch of guys that can play physical sandpaper type game. So, my concern with the Bruins here is after Pastrnak, there's a major fall off. Can this team score? That's a big concern for me. So looking at the top questions facing the team is, can this team bounce back? Was last year a blip, or was it an indication of things to come? And to be honest, I think it's an indication of things to come. I don't think the Bruins can bounce back to being a playoff contender and getting anywhere near the top three without some more work to be done here. It's going to take some more time, in my opinion. I look at this forward group, and I think the team knows it. With what they were able to add this offseason, like I said, they added a bunch of blunders here. Now, they also have Mark Kastelik as well, who Daily Faceoff did not have in that lineup, but Kastelik's certainly going to be in that lineup as well. So you got guys like Kastelik, Jeannot, Corrali, Eyssimont. It's just a bunch of beef. They will be physical, they will be tough to play against, but I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of offense. So that's going to be, interesting to see how things kind of play out there. But, can they bounce back? I don't think so. Not in 1 year. Secondary scoring, like I said, a major issue. Plus, you're hearing rumblings of guys like Zacha and Mittelstadt both being mentioned in the trade bait world. If one or both of those guys ended up getting moved, it's going to deplete things even further. Can Morgan Geekie, who had a beyond career season last year, can he continue at that pace? I mean, it was also a contract year for him, and unfortunately, we've seen numerous players over the years have a career season when they're due a big free agent contract, and then things kind of settle down. He'll have every opportunity to play a lot of top-line minutes in a lot of important situations, play with a guy like David Pastrnak, so I suspect that Geekie will have a decent chance, I think, at continuing at a pretty good pace and giving similar type numbers. Jeremy Swayman will be an interesting player to watch as well. Can he personally bounce back and be better? I do believe he can, and I think he's good enough to steal some games for the Bruins. So I don't think they're a team that anybody should be taking lightly. Like I said, they're going to have a lot of tough, beefy players to play against in the bottom six. They're going to have a good goaltender. They're going to have, and they get some more size on the back end as well. A guy like Zadorov back there, they're not going to be a fun team to go visit, especially at home. But, I don't know that the Bruins are going to be able to score enough goals to score themselves out of trouble. If Swayman is better, maybe he wins them a few extra games, but I think that's probably about as far as we can go. I think the more realistic outcome for the Bruins this year is that we're going to see them continue to be one of the lower ranked teams in their division. Probably sell off a few more assets as the year goes and continue to work towards getting some more young talent on this team to help it more into the future. But I think the Bruins have a little ways to go before they can get back to the playoffs. But let me know what you think on this team. What do you expect from the Boston Bruins this season? Will they bounce back and be back in the playoff mix after a major down season last year? Or is last year just an indication of things to come, and this is going to be a longer stretch before we see a more competitive Bruins team challenge for a cup or playoffs again in a little while? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.